Let's go to Madison and talk to James H. Fetzer, Professor Emeritus with the University of Minnesota. Welcome to the program, sir. Professor, Syria's President Bashar Assad says Syria is capable of facing Israel. How much do you think there will be a military confrontation between Damascus and Tel Aviv?
Well, it's a very threatening situation, and just to correct John Kerry's observation, there should be a growing cascade of nations protesting the violation of international law by Israel, which we have not heard from our own President of the United States. I am sorry to say, but the dastardly and despicable history of United States involvement in the Middle East has discredited the American government. In my opinion, the threat to the people of Syria is so great by this Israeli strike in violation of international law. Russia and other countries ought to send troops and anti-aircraft batteries there as a humanitarian gesture to uphold international law, which the United States manifestly is not doing.
And of course, the U.S. and Russia have held talks over Syria in Moscow. What about that? I mean, how much is the U.S. willing to come to terms and solve this issue diplomatically, that is, rather than funding and arming the insurgents in Syria?
Well, you have to remember, the play within the play can be very distracting. This attack by Israel and these discussions can conceal the fact that this is only one of a series of nations in the Middle East that Wesley Clark was informed the United States intended to destabilize in the next several years. Those have included Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya. Syria has simply proven to be a tougher nut to crack. But the forces that are precipitating the uprising, the so-called rebels, are clearly mercenary groups. They appear to be aided by Israel, and I suspect strongly the United States. So I do not believe that diplomacy is anything but a concealment, a cover, a delay to allow more of this reprehensible attack on the Syrian people to take place.
Indeed, let me go back to my first question once again, the fact that Syria's president saying that Syria is capable of facing Israel. I mean, in terms of Syria's military might, we know that in the past 2 years, Syria has stood firm in the face of all the insurgency and terrorism going on in the country against it. I mean, how capable is Syria militarily?
I think that's very difficult to assess. They do have a reasonably strong army. Even Hezbollah, remember, defeated the latest Israeli intrusion into Lebanon. But I believe that all of this mischief that is clearly intended by the Western powers in Israel to topple the Assad regime could be put to an end by Russia sending forces as a humanitarian gesture, given that the Israelis are violating international law, and even Barack Obama is complicit by not condemning them and not pointing out that Israel is only entitled to take actions that are in accordance with international law. I believe there's an opportunity here for Russia and other nations to stand with Syria against this unjust intervention by Western powers and Israel.
Indeed. Well, we'll leave it there for the time. Many thanks to Professor James Fetzer from Madison. Thanks for your time there, sir.